Right.
Okay.
Feel free if you need anything during the session to message me. I'm happy to try to help.
Thank you. All right.
All righty. I will begin.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. As you settle in for the webinar today, please feel free to put your name and your agency information in the chat. We would love to learn where you are coming from. We'll get started momentarily. Deborah, I'm getting a question that the chat is disabled for some reason. Could you enable it, please?
Yeah, so I apologize about that. Let me try.
While Deborah's getting the chat up, it's my pleasure to welcome everybody to this July webinar from the Safety Navigator for California Communities. Today, we'll be talking about leveraging safety data for strengthening grant funding applications. And we have a great panel of speakers today. From SafeTrack at UC Berkeley and Kittleson and Associates and myself, and hopefully you'll find the information pretty useful. Next up, what we'll do is we'll take a very quick poll of where everybody's coming from. And maybe, Deborah, we can enable the poll at this time, and then, while folks are taking the poll, you can work to enable the chat.
Yes. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So here is our poll. What best describes your organization? Please select from available options. It helps us track where folks are coming from and help us cater the future programming to our constituents. Yeah, I'll probably give you about another 30 seconds or so to participate in this poll as folks are trickling in. Last 10 seconds or so. Perhaps we can close the poll now. Thank you, Deborah. Appreciate that. Right. Thank you so much for participating in the poll. Really appreciate it, you being here and letting us know where you're joining from. Next up, I want to give you the opportunity to download the participant journal for today's webinar. In the participant journal, you can download this either via the link that Deborah is going to post in the chat, or you can scan the QR code that's on the screen here. Deborah, you can please post the link in the chat as well. And I'll give you some time to download this. This is a Word file that has a summary of today's webinar, the list of guest speaker and the broad topics, as well as it has a place for you to take notes as each of our panelist is speaking. And at the end of you can have your own action items that you want to take away from this webinar. And then a list of acronyms at the end, because as academics and practitioners, we are all guilty of using a ton of acronyms throughout the presentation. And, it's always helpful to have all of those acronyms used during the webinar in one place. So we've done that in the participant journal as well. So there's something that is not clear to you, you can refer back to the participant journal. So I'll give you another minute or so to download the participant journal and have it ready for you to be filled out. And Deborah's posted that in the chat as well. And I would encourage you to use this tool, to use it after the webinar so that you have some key takeaways. And then obviously, all of these slides and all the notes will be available to you within 24 hours of this webinar. So by the end of the day, we endeavor to provide all the presentations and this participant journal and a recording of the webinar, and all of that will be available to you as well after the webinar is concluded. Another maybe 30 seconds or so to download and get ready to take some notes. Hey, so let's move on with our agenda for today. So the agenda is, I'm going to provide some quick updates from our Safety Navigator for California Communities SNCC program. You're here, so I am assuming you're familiar with it, but I'll just give you a few moments to provide you with some links to connect with us and to engage with our programming in the future. We'll talk about some upcoming opportunities with regards to grants that local communities can apply for. Then we'll have our featured presentation from Nolani Fixler at SafeTrack. I'll be talking about crash modification factor, and then Matt Broughton will be from Kittleson and Associates will be discussing how do we weave all the data into a coherent narrative that we can use for different grant funding programs. We'll have some time for question and answer a few minutes after each presenter has spoken. And at the end, we'll have opportunity to ask questions for each of the panelists, or any one of us can, answer any questions you may have. And then we'll wrap up. We'll talk about some next steps and some acknowledgements. So just very briefly, Safety Navigator for California Communities, it's a Caltrans local assistance division funded initiative. And we help California agencies and tribes to pursue federal transportation discretionary grants, particularly in the area of safety. Although, we focus on federal grant, doesn't mean we couldn't help with the Highway Safety Improvement Program grants. Anything that's safety related that you may be pursuing in your communities, you can reach out to us. And the QR code on this page will take you to sign up for our newsletter. We only send out one newsletter per month. And we provide all the information, but then we also provide one-on-one technical assistance. We do monthly webinars. So please go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter. And Deborah has helpfully posted the link online as well, on the chat as well. So please, you can click on the link from there too. Yeah, Daniel, thank you for that helpful tip. Yeah, that'll be great if you can rename yourself by, maybe your name and and your organization. I think that'll be an excellent idea while we get the chat to work. Thank you, Daniel. That's great. You can connect with us, SNCC, on LinkedIn via this QR code and the link that Deborah will be posting in the chat. And again, there is some latest information about the webinars and some helpful things that we find for local communities from around the internet. So you can do that as well. So please, oh, perfect. The chat is enabled now. That's wonderful. I see some folks already taking advantage of that. So folks, feel free to put your information in the chat now. Thank you, Deborah, for taking care of that technical issue. Yeah. So next up, I want to talk a little bit about our resources, our past webinars. We started our monthly webinars in month of February, and we've been doing some webinars on quick build projects, SS4A grants, which project type fits with which type of grant. So we've done all of those things in the past. You can find recordings of all of our webinars on our YouTube channel, SNCC Cal Poly, as you see that on the link. And you can also scan the QR code. Deborah will be posting this link. So you can basically, and then our future webinars will also be posted on the same channel. So you can go anytime to the YouTube channel and access any of our past programming since February of 2026. Perfect. Deborah's posted that link in the chat as well. So please take advantage and subscribe if you would like. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about our next webinar. It's the ISOP process. I just realized that I'm missing an A there in the title, but the link is correct. It takes you to the Caltrans's intersection safety and operation assessment process. And that's going to be our August webinar because, as you know, as a safety practitioners in your communities, intersections are a key piece of infrastructure where we face the most safety challenges. And because we face most safety challenges at those locations, sometimes we have to seek funding to correct that situation. And the way we can utilize the ISOP process that Caltrans has been using for a while, and now they're recommending local agencies use as well. Like, how can we use that process in securing funding and planning for future projects? So we'll talk about that in our August webinar. So I hope you'll take some time to register for that webinar here. So the link will be posted by Deborah in the chat, but then you can also scan the QR code, and then these slides will be available to you as well. So you can register then as well. But we hope that you'll take this opportunity to register for our August webinar, which is on August 18th, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Hey, so next up, I want to talk about some upcoming opportunities. Obviously, the next one that all of you might be seriously considering at this point is the local SIP cycle, Highway Safety Improvement Program, Cycle 13. The call for projects is out now. You can find all the information on the Caltrans's website. The due date is November 2nd. I think one thing that I want to highlight is our partners at CalTAP in CSU Long Beach. They are hosting a free information session by Caltrans's Division of Local Assistance, the Federal Highway Administration, on July 21st at 9 a.m. And I hope you will take advantage by registering for that webinar. That's not directly from SNCC, but it's from our partner organization, CalTAP at CSU Long Beach. So that there will be some great information there, and I hope you will register for that webinar if you haven't already done so. Deborah can post the link to register for the webinar in the chat as well. And I think there will be some great information. And in my panelist presentation later today, I'll also be referring to the ETSIP process and how to be, and in that ETSIP process, some specifics that will be discussed in this webinar and this info session. So please go ahead and register for that. Because obviously, as we all know, that this is something that California, this is one of the most important programs we have for California communities to make safety improvements and seek funding. Great. Make sure that those are posted in the chat. Perfect. So, yeah. So Deborah's posted both of those links in the chat. So please go ahead and register. I'll give you maybe another 20 seconds or so to do so. This next opportunity is from the Federal Transit Administration and U.S. Department of Transportation. It's called Innovative Coordinated Access and Mobility Pilot Program. It's due on September 9th. And the eligible projects are related to public transportation capital projects. And again, some of you, this might not be directly relevant to some of you, but maybe if you're an agency that does public transportation related capital projects, maybe you can share it with your colleagues. This is the one that caught our eye on the grants.gov website. And it's due on September 9th. So it's something that if you have colleagues who might be interested in this, please feel free to share this opportunity with them. And the link will take you to the grants.gov portal where you can find more information about this particular program. Okay. With that, I'm going to take a little pause here before we do last part of this presentation at the end of the webinar. I want to take a little pause, and I will start inviting our featured panelists today. The first one from SafeTrack, Nolani Fixler, and she's going to talk about some SafeTrack program. She's going to talk about how to get the safety data. I'm really looking forward to her presentation. So I'm going to just stop sharing and then we'll move on to Ms. Fixler's presentation.
Thank you so much, Anurag. I will share now. Give me 1 second.
No, of course. And I really appreciate Nolani, for you to be here and share with our audience the resources SafeTrack has for all of us here.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here this morning. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. All right, so today I'm going to talk about leveraging SafeTrack programs for grant funding opportunities in California. This is by no means an exhaustive understanding of the grant funding opportunities, but more of SafeTrack programs and how they might apply to some of these opportunities. So the agenda for today, we'll do an overview of TIMS, the Transportation Injury Mapping System. We'll go over the Complete Street Safety Assessment Program, or CSSA, and a case study of funding awarded from a program participant. We will go over the Community Pedestrian Bicycle and Safety Program, or the CPBSP program, and case studies related to funding awarded to participants in that program. And then I'll look generally at matching these programs to different grant criteria and grants that are available. Before I get started, if you're not aware, SafeTrack is the Safe Transportation Research and Education Center located at UC Berkeley. We are jointly affiliated with the Institute for Transportation Studies, or ITS, and the School of Public Health. And we really orient all our work around Vision Zero and the safe system approach to eliminate fatal and serious injury crashes on our roadways in our state. So first, we'll look at the Transportation Injury Mapping System, or TIMS. It's the data behind all of our programming. It is a free public GIS-based tool for California crash data. It maps fatalities and injuries by intersection, corridor, or city, or custom jurisdictions. There are many different options available on TIMS, and it provides location-specific details that are very helpful for grant applications. It's free to use, no GIS experience is required, and it allows agencies to generate those custom crash queries that are really necessary for grants. This is accessible publicly at tims.berkeley.edu. And if you ever need more assistance on using this resource, we do offer free TIMS trainings. I will share our contact information at the end of this presentation, and you are more than welcome to reach out, and we're very, very happy to help you understand how to use this tool. So the first program I will talk about is the Complete Street Safety Assessments program. Many of you may be familiar with this program, but I will give a brief overview. It is informed by the Safe System approach, and it works with implementing agencies at the city, county, and tribal levels to identify and implement traffic safety solutions that lead to improved safety for all users of California roadways, with an emphasis on vulnerable road users, so people walking and biking and taking transit. The program activities for CSSA include a virtual kickoff meeting with the agency, a crash data analysis conducted by SafeTrack, a benchmarking interview, which really assesses an agency's alignment with institutionalizing the safe system approach. It also may include an engineering and traffic survey analysis. I'll talk a bit more about that. And the final and most important component of the CSSA is the field assessment, in which a technical evaluator goes to the project site and walks the corridors with folks from the city to really evaluate what potential solutions could be applied to those focus areas. So I'll talk a little bit about the safe speed focus that we have really integrated into the CSSA program over the past 2 years. As I mentioned, the typical elements of the CSSA include the crash data analysis, the benchmarking interview, and the field assessment. And the final report will include a primer on the safe system approach, a summary of the data and benchmarking interview, and a set of suggestions from the field assessment. And we worked with 16 sites this year, 4 of which have an additional safe speed component, and we will replicate similar numbers in our future years, likely. But those reports and those sites will include all of the typical components of the CSSA, and additionally, an analysis of the engineering and traffic surveys, and a technical assistance plan for speed limit setting. This plan and this additional context is really useful for leveraging the template to apply the suggested speed management strategies to other corridors as contextually appropriate. And this is taking in new California legislation that allows further speed limit setting flexibilities when it comes to our roadways. So I will look at the case study from the city of Calabasas for the Complete Street Safety Assessment. The city used the 2024 CSSA report to support the SS4A grant proposal. The city won $1.3 million in the 2024 cycle. And the CSSA helped to inform the citywide action plan in the SS4A application. The funding was included for some CSSA recommendations, including the curb extensions and a hawk signal in the city. And I'll talk a little bit more about CSSA in the context of SS4A later in this presentation. If you have any questions about any of these programs, feel free to drop them in the chat or ask me at the end of this presentation, and I will get back to those questions then. The next SafeTrack program I want to talk about is the Community Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Program, or the CPBSP. This program is much more oriented around community engagement. It works to deliver interactive workshops that build local capacity to identify, prioritize, and advocate for pedestrian and bicycle safety improvements by working with agency staff, community-based organizations, and residents under the Safe System approach. So while CSSA only works with implementing agencies, the CPBSP program works with nonprofits, CBOs, and implementing agencies under an umbrella approach. And in that way, it centers community identified needs and lived experience that produce engagement documentation in the final report that is very helpful for SS4A and other grant opportunities, as I will discuss. For the CPBSP, the program activities include 2 in-person workshops with residents, agency staff, and community-based organizations, and a safe system approach primer and a review of local crash data to identify any hotspots and patterns in the city that also align with selected focus locations by the workshop participants. It also includes a walking and biking audit of priority corridors as identified by the workshop participants, and a small action planning activity exercise to identify and quickly plan out the next steps for potential safety projects. The deliverable at the end of this process is a report that summarizes the workshop activities, the workshop findings, the recommended next steps, and all of this is a really great resource ready to cite in a grant narrative. So I'll look at a case study from the city of Riverside. This city conducted 2 workshops in 2023 and used those workshop materials to support an SS4A grant proposal, of which the city won $7.5 million, which included around $700,000 for safe routes to school. Those implementation grant awards work to install enhanced bike lanes, high visibility crosswalks, and other traffic calming enhancements, many of which were recommendations that were highlighted in the CPBSP final report. Other grant-winning communities as of 2026 include Altadena, Muscoy, Lompoc, Blue Lake Rancheria, a tribal site, and Campbell and Westmont High School. All of these applied to different grants, not just SS4A. Caltrans, AARP Community Challenge, U.S. Department of Transportation Tribal Transportation Program Safety Grants. And I'll talk more next about different grant opportunities and how they might apply to different programs. So matching CSSA and CPBSP to program grant criteria. Safe Streets and Roads for All, so SS4A. We do anticipate funding opportunities for this program returning, as I want to note the criteria for SS4A and ATP, which I will mention next, may vary by cycle. So none of these are set in stone, but these are some ways that these Safe Track programs can help inform the grant applications throughout these cycles. So for SS4A, for the safety impact element, the TIMS crash data gives location-specific fatality and injury counts. For the leadership and engagement element, the CSSA benchmarking interview documents an institutional commitment to safety, an alignment with the safe system approach, and improving practices generally. And the CPBSP workshop documents a solid community engagement piece. For the planning prerequisite, the SS4A requires an adopted comprehensive safety action plan. The CSSA can serve as the framework required to build, update, or finalize an SS4A compliant comprehensive safety action plan. So that can be very helpful even in the beginning stages of considering applying for an SS4A grant. For the Caltrans Active Transportation Program, or ATP, for the walking and biking potential element, the CPBSP walk bike audit and the CSSA field assessment both target specific corridors and their walking biking potential and what the current conditions on those corridors are. For the safety benefit, both the CSSA and CPBSP programs include a TIMS crash data analysis. And for the public participation element, the CPBSP workshops really work as that documented community engagement process. For the plan and policy consistency, the regional ATP components require an LSRP, or a local road safety plan. The CSSA can inform LSRP development, again, something that can help even in the early stages of developing an LSRP if you're considering applying to ATP at some point. For HSIP, which is a Caltrans grant, the focus on this is infrastructure countermeasures. So this is a much closer fit to the CSSA report's field assessment recommendations that can really impact specific recommendations that you can roll into an HSIP application. For the planning prerequisite for HSIP, a local road safety plan or an LSRP, the CSSA, as I mentioned, can support and inform an agency's LSRP. And for the disadvantaged community emphasis, the CSSA's benchmarking and equity-focused crash analysis can help strengthen the case for a disadvantaged community emphasis. HSIP rewards proven countermeasures, and CSSA includes FHWA countermeasure scoped recommendations that are lower cost, so that can help as well. For the U.S. Department of Transportation Tribal Transportation Program Safety Fund, I didn't see any tribes answer on the chat, but perhaps some have joined at this point, so maybe this information is very helpful. This is more applicable to CSSA only. We work with tribes through the CSSA, but and have started to work with them through the CBBSP, but this is more applicable to CSSA at this time. So this program looks for consistency with a tribal transportation safety plan, which the CSSA can support or help establish. It looks for data-driven high-risk location identification, which is informed by crash analysis inside tribally owned lands or on tribal adjacent corridors included in CSSA or included in CPPSP. And it looks for systemic or behavioral improvements, which are included in CSSA, infrastructure elements, and the benchmarking analysis that both support systemic countermeasures. Two more grant opportunities I want to mention. There's the AARP Community Challenge, as I mentioned prior. This is a quick action demonstration scale challenge. The CPBSP action planning exercise, which really narrows several projects and their next steps to scope, can develop those relevant projects. And this grant can be a really great next step after a CPBSP workshop is completed to do some type of pilot project or known infrastructure or pilot infrastructure project. This workshop also, the CPBSP workshop and attendance and materials service evidence for visible community support, which is part of this grant application. And this grant application has very low administrative complexity. So the CPBSP already narrows the priorities to a short, very ready to scope list, ready to apply for this grant. For California Office of Traffic Safety grants, the focus is more enforcement and behavioral education and applicability. The CPBSP report and or a TIMS qualitative data collection can provide qualitative and quantitative documentation needed to satisfy the problem identification requirement for this grant, which usually results in safety gear distribution paired with community outreach or something more along those lines of enforcement and behavioral education. And I want to highlight that OTS is the funder of both the CSSA and CPBSP programs. So that concludes all of the information I have to provide about these programs today. I really want to highlight that if you are interested in either of these program offerings for next year, please fill out the interest form that I'm going to drop in the chat now. Second.
I've got you as well, Noelani. I just dropped it if you.
Oh, great. Thank you
If
so
you want.
much.
Sure,
Thank
of
you so
course.
much.
Mhm.
And if you have any questions about these programs, feel free to reach out to the CSSA email, cssa@berkeley.edu for that program, or general questions, safetrack@berkeley.edu. Or I can drop my email in the chat as well, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me. And I will take a look at the chat now. If anyone has any questions about the programs, I'm very happy to answer. Take a few minutes now, but also be aware of time so I can pass it to the next speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nolani. I think there are some things at Q&A that Matt has been answering and Deborah as well, but maybe if you want to take a look at those and see if you have anything to add, and I'll start sharing my screen because I happen to be the next speaker. But in the meantime, if you want to look at some Q&A and either respond via the Q&A or verbally, that'll be great.
Okay, great. Yeah, I see a question about CSSA being for local agencies or just Caltrans. CSSA is for local agencies. We've worked with cities, counties, and tribes. And as I mentioned, it's mainly for implementing agencies, whereas the CPBSP program is for implementing agencies or non-implementing agencies. And yes, we've worked with public universities as well. And to apply for these programs, the application will be on our website, likely sometime in November. That is when we anticipate to launch the program. But please do sign up for more information, and we will be sending information out to folks who fill that out when it is ready to apply for these programs.
Great, thank you. Is everybody seeing my screen okay? Oh, my slide preview should. Okay, I need to correct that.
Raga, I did have a question.
Yes,
And
please.
this is for Nolani because we're always in search of a good tool to use. Is there any tools that you're aware of that where there's a good tool to develop a crash tree? So basically, the crash tree shows all the areas of high risk intersections where crashes may occur.
There is a tool inside TIMS that will list the highest crash intersections in a city or in a selected geographic area. Um, I'm not sure if that fully answers your question.
Kind of, yes, but looking more for a type of application, perhaps like in Excel or Visual Basic that'll help chart or map, basically develop a tree
Hmm.
that'll help make some decisions to be used as a tool.
I'm not sure, but I will ask my community and get back to you. And some folks around SafeTruck might have an idea.
Perfect.
And
Thank you,
and and
Nolani.
and we'll be sure to share if you want to share with us as well. We can share it broadly via our resources as well. We'll be happy to do so. Thank you.
Great.
Great. Thanks all. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again and try to see if I can get this shared right. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about evidence-based countermeasures to build stronger safety grant applications. I'm going to particularly focus on crash modification factors and how they can be used in different grant applications, and there are different tools available for agencies to look for these, and share some examples of past funding opportunities that folks have pursued throughout the country, really, and see how they have used the crash modification factors. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. Sorry, I started the subtitles. My apologies. Okay. So let's go with the outline of my presentation. I'll talk about the need for evidence for countermeasure effectiveness. I'll talk about the Federal Highways CMF Clearinghouse, and then applications of crash modification factors and evidence about effectiveness of countermeasures in general by grant types. And then I'll have some key takeaways for the agencies in attendance today. So if you think about, your grant application and put yourself in a reviewer's perspective or reviewer's shoes, what they're looking for is they're looking for clearly documented safety problem. And that's where a lot of the stuff that Nolani talked about in terms of TIMS and the question, and the question of crash data, GIS enabled, having the location of all the crashes and the number of crashes and so forth that you can get out of TIMS. So that's where you can document your safety problem. So that aspect is covered by the resources that Nolani just shared. But the next, a couple of them are evidence-based countermeasures. What projects are you conceiving, and how they will come to fruition? What are the expected safety benefits of this project that you're trying to undertake? What will be the outcomes? And can you make the connection between the solutions that we are proposing in our grant to the problem that you have identified using the data? So to be able to do that, you will need some connection between the two. And and that's where the evidence-based countermeasure. So this is the need. So that's where the need to go beyond the crash data comes in. The crash data can identify the high crash locations and document the safety problem for you, but the grant application need to show Why are you using the countermeasure that you're proposing? What is the evidence that supports it? What's going to be ultimately packaging the benefit that you might get from that into a benefit cost analysis, right? So you need to do all of that in your grant application. So if I just want to summarize this, so for example, and how that can translate into a stronger grant narrative is that if you were just saying the project will improve pedestrian safety, now you can say the countermeasures will selected using the published research on crash modification factors, CMFs, and demonstrating measurable safety benefits. And I know our next speaker, Matt, is going to talk in greater detail about how the evidence and data translates into a stronger narrative. But I just wanted to give you an example of what you can do if you have access and you have reviewed the CMF-related evidence for a countermeasure that you're proposing, how you can improve your narrative. So that's just a quick example of this. And Matt's going to touch on that a little bit more detail. And I just want to highlight the U.S. Department of Transportation's Benefit Cost Analysis Guide, BCA guide. And that's basically applicable for any kind of benefit cost, any kind of federal grant that you apply for safety, be it SS4A in the future forms that it might continue on. If you're applying for BUILD grant, for example, that has been in existence since 2009 with different names. If you're applying for any of those grants, the U.S. Department of Transportation, they expect you to estimate the baseline crashes. They very, explicitly talk about selecting applicable crash modification factor, verifying their applicability, and then estimate the crash reductions based off of that, and then document certain assumptions. So all of that, you need to be able to do that. And CMF is a tool that's very important for you to be completing this process. So next up, I want to just have you do a little quick poll here to our participants. How familiar are you with Federal Highway Administration's crash modification factors? And you can pick from the options that provided. Thank you, Deborah, for launching the poll here. And I'm going to take a quick look at the chat in the meantime.
Hey, Anurag, I think you're on
You
mute.
are muted, Anurag, yes.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so it looks like 90% of our participants here today haven't been engaging with the CMF clearinghouse before. So so I can do a little bit more deeper digging into it, and I have a few slides, and I would have skipped them over if we had audience that was most experienced with CMF clearinghouse. But this poll is very helpful for me to know where our audience is in terms of the CMF clearinghouse. Thank you for sharing your poll, your experience about CMF clearinghouse. Thank you. Okay. So FHWA CMF clearinghouse, it's a free searchable Federal Highway Administration database. It supports evidence-based countermeasure selection, and I'll go over what type of tools it provides. So CMF clearinghouse is a Federal Highway Administration portal where you can go and search for any type of countermeasures. So for example, Federal Highway has a website called a list of countermeasures for I think there are about 28 different countermeasures that they talk about in the proven safety countermeasure box. And Deborah will be posting the link to that, as well as the CMF clearinghouse. So you can go check that out. But what happens is that you can search for any type of safety improvement or safety project that you're trying to do. For example, if you're trying to install rumble strip, or if you're trying to do leading pedestrian interval on your intersections, and it gives you a list of past studies that have evaluated that countermeasure in different contexts. And then you can find the study that matches your context, and then you can use that information in your grant application. So you can figure out what type of countermeasure should you select for your problem, the safety problem that you've documented with the collision data, how effective it has been in the past in other studies, and what benefits can you expect if you were to implement it in your communities. So what I'll do is I will just go ahead and share, just an example of what type of countermeasure that you can find and what type of information you find about that countermeasure. So for example, if you install wider markings and edgeline rumble strips with resurfacing, if this is the project that you're trying to do, then what you can do is you can find these information on the crash modification clearinghouse. So you can find the actual CMF, which is the crash modification factor, which has the link of, which has the CMF of 0.76. So what this means, and then you have another information called CRF, which is the crash reduction factor. So you can see that these are basically corresponding to each other. So, and then it tells you the area type. This is a rural area, and this is the reference, the study where this was conducted. So you can see, and then it has like a star rating about the quality. So obviously the higher quality means it has more robust data collection, more robust methodology for evaluating that countermeasure. So typically, if all things being equal, you want to select a higher quality CMF that is available through the clearinghouse. But you can see that if you do this improvement in a rural community, you can expect all crashes. So this is KAVC, so all possible types of injury crash, all possible injury severity level of crashes to reduce by 24%, which is the crash reduction factor, and 1 minus 24% gives you the crash modification factor of 0.76. Okay. And then you can find the same thing in the same study when they look at the urban locations. They expected a 10% crash reduction. And then the CMF for that location would be 0.9. So I hope that helps you clarify. So for example, if you're doing it in you're dealing in a rural community, then you will be using a crash modification factor of 0.76. You're reducing it, you're expecting a 24% crash reduction. And that would mean that now you're able to, when you're estimating your benefits from this countermeasure, you know that you're going to reduce 24% of the crashes. And you can find, so for you, it's very important to look at the context of the study, what type of targeted crash types are there, and what is the quality of that crash modification factor that's there. So how do you know if the CMF that you're finding in the clearinghouse fits your grant? You can check the application context, like urban and rural, what type of crash type you're trying to address, what type of road users you have. And, if the study is not very old and it's going to be, in the correct context, and then the study quality, which would be the star rating of that study. So these are the important things that you want to find from that. And then I want to just quickly cite a few examples of CMFs that have been used in the SS4A grant application. So for example, this is from the grant that was written by City of Seattle. And I found that grant online, and I'm quoting from this. For example, they provided high visibility marked crosswalk, and they documented that benefit of an FHWA proven safety countermeasure. And they mentioned that you could reduce pedestrian collision by about 40%. And where did they get this information? They got it from the CMF information right here, which was 0.6. And then CRF was 40%, right? So they were, and then again, this is one thing I want to highlight. This is a little bit lower star rating quality CMF. However, they still were able to use it because it's part of the CMF clearinghouse. So even so it's very important that and it's in urban setting. So it's very important for you to find the right context of your, even if the star rating might be a little bit lower, it's very important that you match the context of the study to your context in which you're applying for the grant. Okay, I hope that makes sense to you. I'm going to look at the chat and see if there are any questions I need to address here. Okay, I'll try to speak a little bit up. Okay. Yeah. Wendy has asked a question about sharing the website. That'll be the cmfclearinghouse.fhwa.gov. It was shared by Deborah a little bit further up in the chat, but I can copy paste that again. There you go. Now, one thing that comes up often in grant applications is that you might be considering multiple countermeasures, right? Because when you're writing the grant, you're not just trying to implement one countermeasure. You might be implementing multiple countermeasures. For example, RRFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacon, or a refuge island pedestrians. You might be improving the lighting at the same time, or the crosswalk. You might be marking the crosswalk, and you might be doing speed management at the same time. So FHW's CMF Clearinghouse has some great relevant guidance via webinars to address different potential overlapping effect scenarios. So you might have no overlap, you might have a full overlap, you might have some overlap, you might have one countermeasure that enhances the effect of the other, and you might have certain countermeasures which lead to counteracting effects, right? So there could be a lot of different things that might be going on. And the Clearinghouse has a portal for past webinars where you can find relevant guidance. And I still want to highlight that we also offer one-on-one assistance. So if you're ever dealing with something and you're not sure how to account for multiple countermeasures, you can go ahead and do that and request a one-on-one assistance with me. And then I can guide you as to how do you consider multiple countermeasures if you have any questions about that. So this is the QR code takes you to a Calendly link where you can schedule a one-on-one meeting with SNCC staff. That'll most likely be me at this point if you have a highly technical question. So feel free to do that at any point. Okay, thank you, Deborah, for posting that link. So next thing I want to talk about is, that CMF usually would be useful for the implementation grant, but it could also be used in a planning grant application. And that was kind of interesting to me that, even when you're developing your safety action plan, the CASE MPO in Utah, they combine crash history, safety performance functions, and crash modification factors to evaluate different alternatives, estimate crash reductions, and prioritize projects for future SS4A and ETSIP grant implementation. This is for the state of Utah, of course, but the idea is the same. And I quote from that grant, and you can find the Safety Action Plan grant link also in the chat that Deborah will be posting. So that gives you an idea. It's not just, CMFs could in fact be used in the planning grant as well. So the image at the bottom of the slide that you will find, it's quoting directly from the SS4 grant application. Yes, thank you, Daniel, for pointing out that the one-on-one assistance that SNCC provides is of no cost to the agency. And I want to thank Caltrans's Division of Local Assistance for providing that resource. Now, evidence-based countermeasure selection for ETSIP program. I know ETSIP program is currently active. Highway Safety Improvement Program for Caltrans, which is, as I mentioned, the due date is in November. So what Caltrans has done is that they have used the CMF research at the CMF Clearinghouse to develop standardized crash reduction factors. And there are some local roadway safety resource, local roadway safety manual, LRSM, and HSIP analyzer tools that are available. So LRSM section 4.1 deals with the crash modification factors. So you can find some of those relevant crash reduction factors in that local road safety manual directly. So you don't have to go to the CMF Clearinghouse when you're doing the ETSIP application. But then, You can also find ETSIP Cycle 13 app. If you are a ETSIP Cycle 13 applicant, you can use your most relevant HSIP analyzer tool depending upon the application category, benefit cost ratio category, or the funding set aside category. You can find the relevant highway safety improvement program analyzer tools that incorporate crash modification factor directly into it. So you don't have to necessarily, for the state ETSIP grant, you don't necessarily have to go to the CMF clearinghouse. A lot of those things have been incorporated in your local road safety manual and ETSIP analyzer. And then just want to plug our webinar again. If you are interested in learning more, I would strongly recommend, I know I mentioned that before in my previous presentation, but I want to highlight that again in the CalTAP hosted free information session. And this is the webinar that I already asked you to register, but if you're not there at that time, you can go ahead and register for that webinar. We'll go look up the chat while I give you the opportunity to maybe register for this webinar if you missed this before. Thank you, Deborah, for posting the link. Yeah. Great. Let's see if there's some questions. Yeah. Yeah, and then the link that Deborah posted, it's basically the ETSIP Cycle 13 link. If you scroll down, you'll find all the ETSIP analyzer tools to complete your application. And this brings me to my last slides. I just want to give you some key takeaways for you all. For ETSIP program, for CalTrans, use the LRSM and ETSIP analyzer as your tool. For any of these federal grants and ATP, use the CMF clearinghouse directly. And as I mentioned, we can help you identify appropriate CMF and strengthen grant application via one-on-one assistance. So feel free to reach out to us. And with that, what I'll do is I'll hand it off to our next speaker, Matt, and I'll look for any questions you all might have, and I'll be happy to answer them either now or after Matt has spoken. Thank you, and take it away, Matt.
Yeah, I'll get my screen. All right. There we go. I confirm you can see my screen.
Looks good, Matt.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so what I'm going to talk about is what do we do with all of that data and how do we tell a story to get selected? So really the why us question. Many of these grants that we've been talking about are highly competitive, and really in order to be selected, we really need to leverage that data to tell as complete a story of what the benefits of that project are going to be, so that those that are reviewing that grant see what we are doing and why it is important to the community, and move that forward and rank it highly to be selected. So to go through just a quick agenda, I'll talk a little bit about what does the data tell us, how do we use the data, how can we tell a story with that data, and then discuss how we make decisions and how we document how we make decisions in the grant to help improve the scoring of it, and then thinking about who is reviewing. And that's where I'll talk about some of the different grant programs that we typically apply for safety funding, and just kind of close out with a couple of final thoughts on why us. Overall, I think when we think about the data and the analysis that we're doing, I'm sure all of us on here love getting in the weeds with the data. But at the end of the day, when we're thinking about a grant, we really want to focus on what the data does to support our grant and how our project needs address that data. So I think two ends of the same, they're the same statement, just written in different ways, but really want to make sure that as someone is reviewing our grant, that they clearly see how the data is supporting the decisions that we made for the project that we're proposing for that grant, and then seeing how specifically that project is addressing the needs that we've identified through that data analysis. So when we start with the data, really, we want to focus on, like I just mentioned, what are the needs that we're seeing on the corridor. That can be something like a crossing gap. Here's a photo. A common situation where we see long spacing between signals and no crossing opportunities. So pedestrian there standing in the median, looking to get across. But it may also be, again, the crash history being a core informer from the data. It could be the number of conflict points that we have, especially as we think about the safe system or a gap in the network. Or it may be that we're documenting this is a route that children take to school or seniors take to the senior center. And then the key piece after we've identified those needs really is to tell the story of how we have addressed that need through the project improvements. So we really want to connect the dots between the crash data that we may have at that site or the conflicts that we identified, and what is this project specifically doing in order to address it. And then I think, especially for federal grants, where project readiness is a key component of the grant application, it's also important to just recognize what the project can't address to show that you have thought through and made design decisions and that this project is ready to move forward for implementation. So that's really, we made a design decision for this treatment over that treatment. Maybe on one block of a corridor study, we're not able to get the protected bike lane in for a variety of different implementation constraints, and so there's only a buffered bike lane. But being able to document why that decision was made while still communicating the overall benefit to the project. So we obviously don't want to undersell our project at the same time in the grant application, but we do want to be realistic and show that we've made decisions that are going to help us move forward to implementation. When we talk about matching the data with the project elements, we really want to be as specific as we can in the grant application. And that'll vary a little bit with the grant program that you're pursuing. But as we think about the opportunity to eliminate a high-speed turning movement, for the example there in the top of where you have this free right turn lane, can we remove that? That removes a high-speed turning conflict point for a pedestrian that's trying to cross that street at the same time as removing another conflict point that would occur at high speed for vehicles upstream from that location. And we want to, again, tie that data, any data that we have supporting to say there were 15 crashes at this location that involved a right turning vehicle being struck, or 3 pedestrians were hit at this specific location. To the extent that we have that data, we always want to be providing those specifics to then say, and that is why we made the design decision to remove this free right turn lane to help address these turning conflicts that are here, and we're replacing it with an improvement that's going to slow vehicle speeds at that location to reduce the potential severity for pedestrian crashes. So just again, an example of what that might look like for that. As Dr. Pandey just went through with the CMF clearinghouse and the LRSM for Caltrans being great resources for research-backed crash reduction factors, to be able to then go one step forward to say, with this improvement, we then expect this benefit. And often for the federal programs, you will have to demonstrate that cost benefit. But there will also be times where you aren't able to directly do that based on a treatment that you want to implement may not have a CRF or CMF available. And so then leveraging the research that is there, or as I was just discussing with that free right turn movement, of how are we eliminating a conflict or reducing the potential severity of it, and how does that align with the principles for the safe system alignment, again being for when we're thinking about federal grants, a key component of how we want to approach thinking about demonstrating safety for an SS4A grant or a build grant. I've mentioned a few of these already, but just to kind of specifically touch on them, and I'll show a couple examples of types of data that we often use from the safety side of crash data. So I think we're probably most familiar with using the crash data specific to our individual location. We have 100 crashes here. 15 of them involve left turning movements, and so we're trying to address a left turn movement improvement at this location. But it can also be equally useful to set the context of how those crashes relate to citywide issues that the project is addressing. So not only do we have left turn issues here, we also know that left turn crashes are one of the most frequent causes of fatal and severe crashes in our imaginary jurisdiction. And so being able to refer to those citywide or SHSP, the Strategic Highway Safety Plan for the state, um, being able to refer to how the improvement is not only benefiting the specific site, but the overall jurisdiction or statewide safety priorities is always going to help, again, tell that story of how we're advancing safety, not just here, but more broadly. We can also look to crash risk factors. So this is that systemic approach where maybe you don't have a crash history for this particular location, but you know that there is some characteristic that demonstrates risk for future crashes. So really this often is done at that citywide or regional level to evaluate what roadway characteristics or intersection characteristics are associated with a higher frequency of more severe outcomes. And so we might know that 6-lane roads with high speeds are associated with an increase in pedestrian fatal and serious injury crashes. We may have a site that doesn't have those characteristics, but we can refer to the overall citywide pattern of that to proactively be addressing those improvements. And while some grant programs like HSIP are currently oriented towards demonstrating that benefit cost explicitly through kind of a CMF approach, we're seeing more and more the opportunity to integrate and apply for more systemic improvements that are looking to be proactive in how we're addressing safety. And then we also can think about conflict points. Where are the points that more severe outcomes are going to likely occur? And I'll show an example in a moment of what that might mean. What is the exposure? So how many lanes does a pedestrian need to cross? And how many vehicles do they need to pass? Potential vehicles do they need to pass in order to make it across that intersection? And then we can also support it, I think was mentioned earlier in the Safe Track programs of doing the road safety audit to get community input and feedback, or doing surveys with schools or the community overall to really understand what are the stories that we're not seeing in the data to help supplement and add additional context and value to the application that we're telling. From the crash data perspective, pretty sure everyone's very familiar, but this is just an example of mapping out Tim's crashes at a location. Most often, we are focusing on fatal and serious injury collisions, integrating the safe system approach through Director's Policy 36 for Caltrans, but then through the safe system approach at the federal level. And so really thinking about how does our project explicitly address those as we're trying to achieve the safe system, while also what are the other safety benefits that we're getting through addressing that data. When we think about the same location here, thinking about conflict points. So this is where do vehicles potentially interact with other vehicles, so the potential for a crash. And in this example here, just showing for a typical diamond interchange, the legend there showing the different types of conflicts that can occur. So crossing, merging, or diverging conflict points. So crossing conflict points are the highest kinetic energy potential. So if we're able to eliminate or reduce the potential kinetic energy that's associated with those movements. So if you think about a left turning vehicle and a vehicle coming through straight in the other direction, really the opportunity for a very high kinetic energy in that of fast traveling vehicles that could then is more likely to result in a more severe outcome for the parties that are involved. And so if we think about how can we minimize the number of conflict points, and this can be done the same for pedestrians and bicyclists navigating through that location as well. And then here's just a final example of as we think about exposure, kind of along the same lines of the conflict points here. This is where if a pedestrian was navigating across this diverging diamond intersection where or interchange where they would need to cross the roadway. This diverging diamond has no pedestrian facilities with it, so that's again an even bigger issue to address. But with the locations here of noting these free right, not controlled movements, so you have the high kinetic energy in addition to the need to cross at multiple points across the corridor if you were trying to navigate through the interchange. And so again, just things that we can use as we talk about the language of what we might write in the grant is that this we might be trying to address the higher speed turning conflicts that occur at some of these free right turn movements along the corridor. We might be talking about the number of lanes that need to be crossed and how our improvement is addressing that, or the total number of crossings that need to be made in order to achieve, in order to navigate through the location that we're talking about. And so really, when we talk about the storytelling, what I really want to emphasize is looking for what the through line of your project is. It's very easy for us to get caught up in having a lot of data of here are all the great things about our project, but it's equally important to be able to distill that down into that story of we have selected these treatments for this reason to achieve this goal, and being able to have that data and the benefits that we're documenting continue to reinforce that so that as a reviewer, they're able to understand why the decisions were made for this project and how we're going to help them achieve how they're going to help achieve the safety benefit and the goal that we've stated. I think another thing that I find beneficial is using humanizing language. So really directly addressing the fact for a safety project that we're looking to stop people from being killed or severely injured on our roadway, and talking about people as people. So often we use the language of technical language of bicyclists or pedestrians, but these are people that are walking, rolling, or biking in our community. And I think just that little change in the language to talk about people that are walking can really help different reviewers kind of contextualize out of just the data presentation into what does this project mean for who we're trying to benefit from that project. And if it's a Safe Routes to School project, that might be something where you're able to really even further humanize it of, 20 school children typically walk to school along this route, and this project is going to provide a safe crossing for them and their accompanying adults. So again, just being able to really help tell that story and reinforce who the users are that we're talking about and how this project explicitly benefits them. So kind of, along those lines of really being specific of who is this project for, how are we addressing it? Different grants are going to have different criteria for how we are able to address those. And then I think, again, in that storytelling piece of how is the need identified and the project developed over time. So thinking through what are the prior plans that informed the project selection, what analysis and engagement happened, how I think especially we're seeing a move towards how does the community really drive the decisions that are being made, especially for competitive programs like the ATP grant program from from the CTC, and what are the iterations that we went through to make those decisions. Again, that showing those iterations really helps someone see that you've thought through the location and identified the design constraints that are going to lead to implementation. And the more that we can show and tell, so it's very easy to write the data analysis, but being able to demonstrate and show how we arrived at those decisions. So showing the picture from a project in Bernie in Northern California, very focused on safe routes to school improvement. So being able to show the very large logging trucks that go through the corridor and how close they are to the shoulder and minimal bike lane that exists on that corridor to demonstrate why this location was important, and then showing the work of the improvements that were identified through that corridor walk audit and what are the destinations that we're trying to help people access along that corridor, and then who are we designing for, again, doing surveys with school children if it's a safe route to school, having them help inform and provide graphics that are going to help reinforce the reason why someone might want to select our project on top of the safety benefits that we document through a crash modification factor or crash history documentation that we might do. So when we think about, having that story, I really emphasize the how did we make decisions. I think for federal grants especially, there's, almost always a project readiness question, and being able to talk through the decisions that you went through and why different choices were made as it relates to the data, and based on the feedback or feasibility that you're getting, are going to help demonstrate and show to a reviewer that you have thought through how this project is going to get built, what the constraints and challenges are, and that they're already addressed. So if they're choosing between a project that sounds really great and a project that sounds really great, but it's not through it, that they're going to have more confidence in your project moving forward and being able to be implemented to make those decisions. And I think, again, just always tying that back to the data that's available and then also how that supports implementation. So this is just an example from another program where we wanted to tee up this intersection and we wanted to simplify it as much as we could. We had to do a little bit of a funny implementation here in order to maintain a driveway that otherwise would have killed the project to not be able to implement it. And so that just became a key design decision that we wanted to be documenting, that, while this is not the most ideal setup for direct pedestrian paths to be able to access this location, that was the best available option in order to maintain this project moving forward. And then similarly, on the bottom image there of the separated bike lanes, of using separated with a curb on the bottom portion of this corridor, but on the northern part where there were more commercial businesses focusing on maintaining and preserving that parking. And so being able to communicate not only what are the benefits from the project from a safety perspective of putting in the protected bike lanes, but how are we still reinforcing and helping serve other economic benefits that we're providing through that effort. And then we also want to think about who is reviewing. So every grant program is going to be a little bit different of who the reviewers are for your application. Most typically engineers and planners. Sometimes there's economists or other environmental reviewers that are looking at the grant, depending on that. And then what is the purpose of that program? If it's HSIP and it's very focused on safety, it's very easy and clear so that we're just looking at safety and that's what we're trying to address first and foremost. But other grant programs are going to have more of a focus on environmental impact or equity impact, or be purely driven by kind of that economic cost, or how do we support economic development within the community at the same time as we make these decisions. And so again, as we're writing our application, we want to think about who is the reviewer and what is the purpose of this grant. So we may have an amazing safety project, but we're applying for a grant that thinks about other things beyond safety, and we need to make sure that we're addressing all of those things equally, if not more so in some cases, versus the safety benefit, depending on what the purpose of the grant is. And so just some examples, I've talked about the Highway Safety Improvement Program. This is very much a straightforward grant in terms of show me the numbers that demonstrate the benefit that articulating, demonstrating, and I think as we think of who is our audience, who's reviewing, this is primarily kind of from an engineer first of showing me the technical data that is supporting the safety benefit that's going to result in the highest benefit cost ranking for your project. And so first and foremost, it's getting a clean, good benefit cost ratio, but then also clearly relating the project elements to that data so that when the reviewer is reviewing that application, they know that the justification for the project is appropriate. And really kind of with these grants, there's not a lot of fluff in it. It's really just give me the technical, meet the criteria, and generate the highest benefit cost that you can. I think that's one of those decisions that I encourage everyone to think about. Having a benefit cost ratio of 300, it will guarantee that your project gets funded, but that also might mean that you're losing out on the opportunity to fund other safety improvements with a benefit cost ratio that you bring down a little bit in order to address a couple more sites at the same time. And so those are kind of the balancing pieces of how do I maximize my grant potential while maximizing the opportunity at the same time to be successful in winning that grant application. On the opposite end of the spectrum is the active transportation program. I think this is very similar to a lot of the other federal grants as well, really focusing on a more complete story for your project of what safety is a key important component of that, and one of the most important criteria that we're going to use to demonstrate that project. But we also need to make sure, as part of a grant program like the ATP, to show how the community was involved, how it was informed, the decisions that were made, and then supporting that with the technical data to say, and that is justified through these benefits that we're generating. And with the ATP program, that's a program that's not focused on safety explicitly. It is safety for people that are walking, biking, or rolling, as well as enhancing their mobility and connectivity. And we want to think about that as part of, the story cannot just be here are just the safety benefits. We really need to think about that broader story that hits on equity, environmental, economic, community benefits that are generated by the project. And I think a unique thing for the ATP program is that it's both engineers and planners that are reviewing in this context. And so we really want to be thoughtful about giving the detail that an engineer reviewing your grant will be looking for in terms of what are the design decisions that are being made and how, while at the same time providing that broader community context that a planner may more strongly relate to as they're scoring the application. And then finally, for Safe Streets and Road for All, really, again, a narrower focus than the ATP of focusing on the needs and project benefits through the safety. So this is where you can integrate that direct CMF calculation. What are the number of crashes that we're trying to address through this project, and how does the project connect to those crashes? Tying it to federal programs and federal guidance that is currently existing, including the safe system alignment. How are we helping reduce the conflicts and minimize the number of people that are dying or severely injured on our roadway? I think from the federal side, there's always an extra interest in how projects are innovating, and that can be innovating locally of this is the first time the city would do X. It can also be this would be the first implementation of this, statewide or nationally that we're aware of. And then what are the economic benefits as well for the community that come into that? There's also currently a lot going on with the equity and fairness, so I just want to be, make sure that we're using the language for the current, as administrations change, to help document those elements, and then think about that technical cost documentation as well, being kind of that critical underpinning to that narrative that we tell. And so just finally, just to close out here, apologies running a little long, we really also want to think about how do we show support from the partners that are going to help implement this. So have them write letters of support for your project where those are allowed, to help them share the data and benefits that are generated from the project in their words, to reinforce your story, but also to share from their perspective. Really, I think focusing on how we are leveraging prior work to develop this project and how it connects to other elements can really also help move forward and kind of better demonstrate the overall competitiveness of our project. And to the extent that you can, through the engagement that you do or news that may have occurred around the site, how do we share why the project is important in the community members' words themselves rather than our technical language, but of what are the benefits that they're seeing? So direct quotes can be an amazing resource in a grant application. And then always be thinking about what makes our project unique for the agency or the grant agency. Why would you want to select this over something, another very great project, nationally? This is going to be unique and beneficial in these ways, always being kind of that, why do you want to select us over somebody else, being that core piece that I really want you all to think about as you're developing and articulating the project benefits in your grant pursuits. And so with that, I think I'll hand it back to Dr. Pandey.
Thank you, Matt. This is great conversation, great ideas in communicating the benefit. I do have a raised hand, so maybe I'll give Diana the option to ask the question at this time. I'm trying to see if I can see the option. And Deborah, if you see it before me, can you allow Diana to talk? She has her hand raised for a little bit.
Yes,
I was
one
trying to
minute.
do that, but for some reason, I'm not able to do that.
Yes, I will. Sorry, I could have anticipated that. One second.
I think you're right. Right. And in the go ahead. Diana, are you able to? Oh, yeah, I think I'm allowed to talk. Okay, go ahead, Diana. You can ask your question now. You'll have to unmute yourself. Are you there, Diana?
Hi,
Okay.
Diana. Can
We'll wait.
you unmute your let me make sure you have that ability. One second.
I think she does now because I was able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
She may have
yeah,
stepped.
she may have stepped up. Yeah. Okay, so while we're waiting for Diana, if she comes back, I did have one question, Matt, for you.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about how, you mentioned that, you don't necessarily want a benefit cost ratio of 300 and in the comment I posted in chat is like, that may be counterproductive from a safe systems perspective. Could you elaborate on that a little bit for the audience here? Like how,
Yeah, I think it can be very easy. Well, if you have a site that has a lot of crashes occurring at it, and you're doing a very straightforward improvement. So we'll say that there's a location that has 15 pedestrian crashes, including a couple that are fatal and severe. If we are installing a marked crosswalk or an RFB, the benefit that we're going to get from that based on a CMF may be very high given the high frequency of crashes that we have at that location. But if there's the opportunity for us to make 5 other locations also make an enhancement at the same time, the same enhancement addressing that same type of situation, and we still have a benefit cost ratio, of 50, that is still a very competitive grant application that we have. But at the same time, we have proactively been able to go out and think about safety, being both proactive and reactive, being part of the principles of the safe system, of addressing something that we know we want to make these improvements at these other locations at the same time. proactively get out there, address conflict points, increase awareness, and or mitigate conflict points that may be occurring before they happen necessarily. And so again, it's just telling that story is part of the key, like connecting. We see these crashes at this location. These are other locations that have the same characteristics. And so we're going to address 6 of these locations at the same time, being kind of a story that you might tell of how you move beyond the single location. So having one site with a score of 300, you're very likely to get funded, but you're going to have less benefit for your community overall through that.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And then the next question is from one of our audience members about, what type of program may potentially address influence of alcohol and other substances in, how do you address those in the application? Are there programs specifically directed to those, or, and Narissa, please feel free to clarify if I'm not getting to your question correctly, but that's the question.
Yeah.
Like how are Mhm.
I'll answer from 2 directions. I think from the how do we address them? So we are not going to engineer our way out of people driving under the influence of alcohol, and so that's where a grant program. So there are grant programs from OTS that focus more on an education, or you can do targeted enforcement, and you want to be mindful of how the equity impacts of targeted enforcement may play out. But really, from the education encouragement side of things, so the Office of Traffic Safety has grant programs that can target that specifically to do a safety education campaign around that and being able to communicate it. So I think San Francisco did one a few years ago. There are different styles of those education campaigns that can, there's the encouraging, and then there's also the more demonstrating, here is what actually happens when you drive, and so I think the San Francisco one was like, this is where somebody died getting hit by a drunk driver. And, so it's a very direct message. Some communities don't respond well to that, and it's more about the encouragement of demonstrating why we don't want them to occur. And there are also a number of organizations that directly look to address that. I think from the other end of the spectrum, just when we're talking about safety benefit and crashes, so some grant programs, I think in HSIP, there is a limitation of, so you want to make sure that when you're talking about the crashes you're addressing, that you'll be able to articulate clearly how the project is addressing them. So if your site has 10 DUI crashes at it, that's not maybe something that you're going to choose that site for an HSIP engineering improvement at that location. But if you're applying for a program like ATP where you can include education program, that might be we saw that 40% of the bike and ped crashes in our community had some alcohol involvement associated with them. And so we're going to do, an education program to specifically focus on that issue alongside the design improvement. And so, Narcissa, I'm not sure if you wanted me to clarify any of that, or we're looking at a different angle, let me know.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. I saw, I want to just check in with Diana again. Did you want to ask your question? You can unmute yourself and ask it now at this time. No, it's okay. What I'll do is I'll go back to my presentation, and we're just trying to wrap up this webinar. Great thanks to Matt and Nolani for their insights and really great beneficial information as communities prepare for the SNCC program and future federal grant applications. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. Nope, wrong slide. Okay. See if I can get to that. Oh, okay, I'm going to have to stop share and reshare. My apologies. Okay, go do that again. Share. Okay, so yeah, you should be able to see my screen again. Okay. So
It's just
sure.
loading. Mhm.
Yeah, it's still loading. I'm not sure what's going on. I did maybe unplug my computer, and that sometimes slows things down. Okay. So this is kind of, I'm trying to wrap up again. I want to thank our guest speakers for today's presentations. And I want to acknowledge Deborah Hood, her efforts behind the scene in keeping things running smoothly at SNCC. I want to thank our partners at CalTap from Cal State Long Beach for promoting our Safety Navigator programming and connecting us to you all. And then obviously, last but not the least, Daniel for his insights throughout this webinar, but also the support that enables us to offer this free programming, one-on-one assistance, the webinars, all of it to you all as you try to make safety improvements and bring safety dollars to your community. So I want to acknowledge all of his efforts as well. Thank you so much. Let's see. And then that brings us to my last slides. I would really appreciate if you could take a survey about this webinar and give us some feedback. So that's the first link up top there. Again, I want to highlight that one-on-one assistance link for safety improvement. This could be related to CMF that we talked about today. But if there are any safety grant related issues that you think, maybe you're running into a challenge, if there is something that we could do, you can book a half-an-hour appointment, again, free of cost, no charges to the communities. And then you should probably register for our ISOP webinar in August, where we'll talk about how the ISOP process can support your grant applications in the future. And you can also email us on the Safety Navigator for California Community email address, safety-navigator@calpoly.edu. So some QR codes for you. I'm going to go back and monitor the chat if there are any other questions here. Yeah, thank you for, and Matt, thank you for providing your email address. And and thank you, Deborah, for posting all the links. Really appreciate all of your participation today and engagement. Feel free to connect with us via our different channels, LinkedIn, via email, via our newsletter. There are a lot of ways to connect with us. And then please, we do look forward to your feedback on the webinar today. And be able to offer you better programming that's more suited to your safety goals in your communities. We'd love to do that. Thank you again. I really appreciate the participation.